Forest Creature's true horror story. Jake Thompson and his college roommate Kevin had been planning the backpacking trip through Oregon's Cascade Mountains for months. 3 days, 2 nights, deep in the wilderness. A chance to disconnect and experience nature before their final semester began. They started the trail at noon on a Friday in late September. The autumn air crisp and perfect for hiking. The first few hours were uneventful. Beautiful scenery, the sound of their boots on packed earth, occasional glimpses of deer through the trees. This was a great idea, Kevin said as they stopped to refill their water bottles from a stream around 4 p.m. I needed this. No phones, no internet, just... Kevin stopped mid-sentence, his head tilted, listening. What? Jake asked. Did you hear that? Jake listened. The forest was quiet. Too quiet, he realized. No bird singing, no rustle of small animals in the underbrush. Just silence. Probably just a predator nearby, Jake said, though his voice carried less confidence in his words. Mountain lion or something. They make everything go quiet. They continued hiking, but the silence followed them. By the time they reached their planned campsite at 6:30 p.m., both men were on edge, though neither wanted to admit it. As they set up their tent in a small clearing, Jake noticed something odd. Hey, look at these trees. Several trees around the clearing had deep scratches in their bark, parallel gouges that started about 7 feet up and extended down to chest height. The marks were fresh, sap still bleeding from the wounds. Bear, Kevin suggested, but his voice was uncertain. Bears don't scratch that high. And these marks are weird, too deep, too deliberate. They built a fire as the sun set, more for psychological comfort than warmth. As darkness fell, the silence of the forest became oppressive. No owl hoots, no crickets, nothing. Just a crackle of their fire and their own breathing. At 9:47 p.m., Jake checked his watch because the moment would be burned into his memory forever. They heard the first sound, a whistle, not a bird call or wind through branches, but a melodic, almost human-like whistle that seemed to come from the darkness beyond their firelight. 3 ascending notes, then silence. Jake and Kevin looked at each other, neither speaking. Seconds later, the whistle came again, from a different direction, then again from another direction, then from multiple directions at once, surrounding their camp. Someone's messing with us, Kevin said, but his hand was already reaching for the hunting knife on his belt. Out here? Miles from anywhere? At night? Jake's rational mind fought against the fear creeping up his spine. Kevin, I don't think those are people. The whistling stopped. In the sudden silence, they heard something else. Footsteps. Multiple sets of footsteps, circling their camp just beyond the firelight's reach. But the gait was wrong. Not the 4-legged patter of an animal, but not quite the rhythm of a human either. It was something in between, something that made Jake's primitive brain scream danger. Show yourself. Kevin shouted, standing up, knife drawn. We're armed. We'll defend ourselves. The footsteps stopped. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then came a sound that made Jake's blood freeze. Laughter. High-pitched, cackling laughter that sounded almost human, but not quite. It echoed around them from multiple directions, overlapping, building to a crescendo that seemed to vibrate through Jake's chest. We need to leave, Jake said, already reaching for his backpack. Now, we hike back to the trailhead tonight. In the dark? Through unfamiliar terrain? That's how people get killed. And staying here while those things circle us is safer? Jake's voice was rising with panic. Kevin, those aren't people. Those aren't animals. I don't know what they are, but we need to get the hell out of here. They grabbed their essential gear, water, first aid, flashlights, and left the tent and most of their equipment behind. Using their flashlights, they found the trail and started hiking back the way they'd come, moving as quickly as they dared in the darkness. The whistling started again, following them, and now they could hear the creatures moving through the forest parallel to the trail. Branches breaking, leaves rustling, always just out of sight of their flashlight beams. "Don't look," Jake said. "Just keep moving. Don't leave the trail. Don't look into the darkness. Just move." But Kevin looked. He swept his flashlight to the right, into the trees, and the beam caught something that made him stumble and nearly fall. A face, pale, elongated, with eyes that reflected the light like an animal's but positioned like a human's. A mouth open too wide, filled with teeth that were wrong, too sharp, too many, and the body beneath was a twisted thing, somewhere between human and something else, covered in matted fur or hair, limbs too long, joints bending in ways they shouldn't. Kevin screamed and ran. Jake followed, abandoning caution, just sprinting down the trail. Behind them, the forest erupted with sound. Those creatures were giving chase, and they were fast. Jake's flashlight beam bounced wildly as he ran, catching glimpses of the surroundings. The trail ahead, Kevin's back, and occasionally, when he couldn't help himself, shapes moving in the peripheral darkness. Multiple shapes, keeping pace, hurting them. They ran for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes before Jake's lungs were burning and his legs were ready to give out. He couldn't hear Kevin anymore, couldn't hear anything over his own ragged breathing and pounding heart. He stopped, doubled over, gasping, and realized with horror that he was alone. "Kevin!" Jake called, his voice cracking. "Kevin, where are you?" Silence. Then that whistling again, from directly ahead on the trail. Jake spun around, prepared to run back the way he'd come, and his flashlight beam caught something that made him freeze. Kevin, standing on the trail about 30 feet away, perfectly still, his back to Jake. "Kevin? Thank God. Are you okay?" Kevin didn't respond, didn't move. "Kevin?" Jake took a step closer, then stopped. Something was wrong. Kevin's posture was too rigid, his head tilted at an angle that wasn't quite natural. And there was something behind him, a shadow, or maybe multiple shadows, blending with the darkness. "Kevin, we need to keep moving, buddy. Come on." Slowly, Kevin's head began to turn. Not his body, just his head, rotating further than a human head should be able to rotate. When his face came into view, Jake's scream caught in his throat. Kevin's expression was blank, eyes wide and unseeing, mouth hanging open, and standing directly behind him, partially obscured by Kevin's body, was one of those creatures. Its two long arms were wrapped around Kevin's torso, holding him upright like a puppet. Its face peered over Kevin's shoulder, grinning with those terrible teeth. Jake ran. He ran past Kevin and the thing holding him, ran down the trail without looking back, ran until his body moved purely on instinct because his mind had shut down with terror. He didn't stop until he saw lights ahead. The parking lot at the trailhead, his car sitting there looking impossibly normal and safe. Jake fumbled for his keys, his hands shaking so badly he dropped them twice before getting the door unlocked. He threw himself into the driver's seat, locked the doors, started the engine, and drove. He didn't look at the trail behind him, didn't check to see if anything was following. He just drove, hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, until he reached the nearest town and pulled into the parking lot of the first place he saw that was open, a 24-hour diner. Inside, under fluorescent lights and surrounded by normal people eating normal food, Jake finally let himself break down. The waitress called the police, who called the Forest Service, who organized a search party. They found Jake in Kevin's campsite, tent still standing, most of their equipment untouched. They found the trail where Jake and Kevin had run. They found marks in the dirt that might have been prints, but were too strange to identify. Sometimes looking like hands, sometimes like paws, sometimes like bare feet, but too large and with too many toes. They never found Kevin. The official report listed him as missing. Likely fell off the trail in the dark. Body not yet recovered. The Forest Service blamed Jake's account on panic, disorientation, possibly hypothermia, affecting his judgment. But Jake knows what he saw. And he knows what he heard. Those whistles, that laughter, that sound of multiple things moving through the forest that shouldn't exist. He never went hiking again. Never camped. Never even walked on a nature trail in a city park. Because Jake learned something that night that most people never learn. The deep forest has things in it that our rational minds refuse to accept. Things that whistle and laugh and move between human and animal. Things that blend with shadows and hunt in packs. Things that take people and leave no trace except for scratch marks on trees and footprints that shouldn't exist. Kevin's family still hopes he'll be found. Still organize search parties every year on the anniversary of his disappearance. Jake attends because he owes Kevin that much, but he never tells him the full truth of what happened that night. How can he explain that their son, his best friend, was taken by something that science doesn't acknowledge, by creatures that folklore remembers but modern society has forgotten? Jake lives with the guilt for running, for surviving, for leaving Kevin behind. But he also lives with the knowledge, the certainty, that if he'd stayed, if he'd tried to save Kevin, those things would have taken him too. The forest keeps its secrets. And sometimes those secrets have teeth. 3 years later, Jake received a package with no return address. Inside was Kevin's camera, the one he'd been carrying that night. Jake almost threw it away without looking, but something made him check the memory card. There were hundreds of photos. Most showed their hike, the beautiful scenery, normal backpacking pictures. But the last dozen, taken in rapid succession with timestamps showing 9:47 p.m., right when the whistling started, showed the clearing around their camp. And in each photo, caught by the camera's flash, were figures. Dozens of them, surrounding the camp, watching from the trees. Pale faces with wrong features, bodies that didn't quite make sense, eyes reflecting the camera flash in colors that shouldn't exist in nature. In the last photo, one of them was reaching toward the camera. Its hand filled the frame, elongated fingers ending in claws, covered in matted fur, but with a thumb positioned like a human's. A hand that was somehow both animal and human, and neither. Jake burned the camera and the photos. But he can never burn the images from his memory, or the sound of Kevin's name being called in that whistling voice in his nightmares, or the knowledge that somewhere in those Oregon mountains, the forest creatures are still there, still whistling, still hunting, still waiting for the next hiker who ventures too deep into their territory.